This is terrifying. And I mean that. I'm nervous. But I also know that saying this is a little bit of a risk, because stepping onto this red dot on the TEDx stage and admitting that you're scared can be seen as, I don't know, weak, embarrassing, maybe a fast way to lose credibility right before your talk. Today, I'm here to challenge this, to ask why we've created a culture where fear has to stay hidden and where excellence cannot make room for vulnerability. Let's try something. Everyone, please turn to the person next to you and just say, "Hi, how are you?" Okay, so I hear a lot of the word good in response. But come on, y'all. It's April. Tax season, final exams, pollen in the air, existential dread in the group chat. And you're going to sit here and tell me we're all good? I think good is sometimes just a script. Scripts are what we use when honesty feels risky. And believe me, I've had my fair share of scripts. Leading up to this talk, I had to submit some information for a speaker bio. Things like titles and roles. So I said, I'm a neuroscientist in training. As a PhD student, I'm an athlete, a founder. But I feel the need to apologize because I feel that I left something critical off the list. A role I've been filling for a long time, and honestly, been striving to unlearn. Actor. And I say this because in each of these domains, science, sport, leadership, I've observed an unsaid expectation to wear a costume and to read a script. A script of strength and confidence and composure, even when these things may not match how we feel on the inside. Why is this? Well, resilience is socially rewarded, as maybe it should be. But society's definition of resilience seems to be biologically incorrect. As a PhD student, I conduct research in a lab where we study resilience by inducing social stress in adolescent mice and assessing its effect on the brain and on behavior. Today, I want to tell you about a result delivered by my colleague, Dr. Andrea Pantoja-Urban, that fundamentally altered my perception of the concept of vulnerability forever. Here she exposed adolescent mice to 4 days of social stress by introducing them into cages of larger territorial mice. At the conclusion of the stress period, she assessed their social behavior by placing each experimental mouse into a box where on one side of the box, behind bars, was one of these larger mice. Not one of the same ones seen during the stress period, but one of the same species. And here she analyzed how much time each experimental mouse spent up near the bars interacting with the other mouse. She showed that among female mice, those that were socially vulnerable following the stressor, so those that froze or hid in the corner as opposed to going up and interacting, these mice preserved cognition and dopamine connectivity, which is key for learning and motivation in adulthood. Whereas these other mice that almost seemed unaffected by the stressor, the ones that went up and interacted anyway, these ones showed deficits in these things in adulthood. I feel it very important to note that results from rodent research cannot possibly capture the range of complexity presented by the human experience. And furthermore, thus far, this result has only been observed in one sex. But I think at the very least, this concept itself warrants some critical reflection as to whether analogs of this coupling between short-term vulnerability and long-term resilience may exist elsewhere in the world around us. Our society would applaud the mice that went up and interacted anyway. Those that get knocked down and get up like nothing happened. Those that stare stress in the face and don't flinch. I used to be one of the applauded. Until I learned, long before any lab experiments, that costumes and scripts of false resilience, they're to our detriment. My first experience with this was in my path to fulfilling my childhood dream of playing Division I football in the NCAA. The very month that I arrived at this long-pursued goal, I unfortunately sustained a severe injury, a spinal fracture. And truly, this rocked my world. But I didn't tell anyone about this injury because I had worked hard for this chance, and I wasn't about to blow it by being labeled as fragile or injury-prone right away. This mindset permeates athletic communities worldwide, and it makes no sense. We fear being perceived as weak, so we take action that makes us more weak. Almost like the mice that weren't affected in the short term. This may come with long-term consequences. And in my case, by pretending this injury didn't exist, by choosing to not accept that it was real, feel what hurt, and vocalize what I needed, I ultimately severely jeopardized the goals I'd had my whole life as a football player. Now, unfortunately, this isn't the only instance where I found myself wearing this costume. I carried it elsewhere. Same script, different scenes. Like burning toast. And instead of just changing the setting on the toaster the next day, leaving it the same, thinking, maybe today's the day the toaster finds inner peace. So I moved on to wear a costume and to burn more toast in neuroscience, where I entered my first lab with the mindset, you can't admit when you don't know something because that looks incompetent. Go learn it yourself so that you do know it. And yeah, this is how I found myself saying to my supervisor day one in my first lab, oh yeah, I'm good with coding, of course. But then found myself at home later on watching the same Python basics tutorial for the 8th time in a row, still scratching my head like, what does the Matrix mean? Outside of that one movie I really like. And in this lab, I never really did learn to accept, feel, and vocalize the weaknesses that my inexperience presented. In trying to look competent, I became less competent than if I had just asked for help. I think in academics, many of us feel like imposters, and we're afraid of being exposed by admitting we don't know something. But again, it makes no sense. Academic exploration itself is driven by acknowledgement of the unknown. If we all were just honest about our own lack of knowledge instead of wearing costumes of false confidence, would so many of us still feel like imposters? Speaking of false confidence, I want to fast forward a little bit here to 2024, when I started my own company and burnt another batch of toast. Because as a founder, I felt a ton of pressure. Pressure to give the appearance to those who I was working with of constant stability and success and growth, Even when in year one, this was far from the case most of the time. And in reality, I was uncertain, overwhelmed, and overworked myself. But hey, remember, never, ever give your employees, your board members, or your investors reason to doubt. Well, at least that's what that one LinkedIn influencer says. Right after posting a photo of their cold plunge, right? I found the opposite. I found that as soon as I started to accept, feel, and vocalize the weaknesses in the mission, that my teammates leaned in. And my external partners grew more intrigued when they saw I was thinking critically and not just selling hype. With this, I want to hit the fast forward button one more time, here to the present day, because I need to get something off my chest. I've wanted to give a talk like this for a long time, because I understand the immense power that sharing our experiences has. But I have been scared out of my mind that this message wouldn't land, that it wouldn't resonate. On Thursday, I threw away the talk I'd been practicing and rebuilt everything, really aiming to speak from the heart. Because I want to apply what I've learned. And I've learned that confidence isn't when you don't have fear. Confidence is when you have fear, like everyone else, but you don't try to hide the appearance of it. You accept it. You feel it. You vocalize it. Is it social stress? Is it a fractured spine? Is it confusing coding? Organizational flaws? Life has its challenges. And this is something that we can't change. What we can change, though, is the weight that we carry through these experiences. We can choose to look strong, hold it all on our own, but almost like the mice, choosing to be unaffected may come with consequence. We can be emotionally weighed down. And life's obstacles can become very, very difficult to travel over. Or we can choose to let our stressors affect us. We can accept them. We can feel them. We can vocalize them. And in so doing, remove the emotional weight and travel through life's obstacles much more easily. One more time, I want everyone to turn to the person next to them and ask, how are you really? This is what we need. And it starts with us. If you've been refusing to acknowledge the presence of a stressor, today, I invite you to accept it. If you have been numbing your pain, tomorrow, I invite you to let yourself feel it. If you have been silent in your struggle, now I invite you to vocalize it. Accept, feel, vocalize. This is the new era of strength. Not one where we hide what we're carrying, but one where we grow because we're willing to carry it together. Accept, feel, vocalize. That's not weakness. That's power.